5 minutes later.
So that's us, every single release day. But how did we get here? How can one brand cause this much heartache every time we try to buy shoes? And while I may have my own story, I bet that yours is pretty similar. Because no other brand, not Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, or McDonald's, has had a bigger influence on me than Nike. As an immigrant to the US, I didn't speak English, so playing basketball was the only way I could make friends for a time. And living in LA in the 80s, naturally I wanted to be like Magic. But when I first saw MJ flying through the air, combined with all those Nike commercials, that was it. 7-year-old me thought MJ was the coolest human being that had ever lived, and even though I couldn't be him, I could own a pair of his shoes. But that was unrealistic at the time. I couldn't buy J's. We were immigrants, and while we weren't dirt poor, my parents definitely didn't have the means to drop $100 on shoes. But the desire to own a pair never faded, and the thought that one day I might be able to buy a pair of Air Jordans became my American dream. And in 1995, Nike released the most beautiful shoes ever made, and I fell in love. The patent leather, purple soles, carbon fiber plate, and the 45 on the back were magical. But I was in college and broke as hell. I couldn't afford J's. But of all the Jordans I've wanted over the years, these were the ones I swore to myself, one day I'm gonna buy me a pair of Concords. And 23 years later, on December 8th, 2018, I finally bought my first pair of brand new Air Jordans. When I was checking out at the store, I got choked up. I wanted to go back in time to tell little Austin, we did it. We finally did it. I admit, I'm a little bit late to the sneaker game, but I've loved Nike since I was young, and now that I could finally afford them, you know I was gonna make up for lost time. So when my friend Sam told me about the sneakers app, I thought I died and gone to heaven. Finally, I had the means and the abilities to get all the shoes I've ever wanted since I was a kid. But after 2 years of trying to buy shoes on the app, I can say that without a shadow of a doubt, the sneakers app is fucking trash. Since I've been using this app, I am no closer to getting the shoes I want than when I was 7 years old. Look, I love Nike and I have since I was a kid, but you have to take a look at the sneakers app objectively and really say that this app is absolute trash. It treats customers like shit every single release day for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users. So I started this YouTube channel to talk about this app specifically from a product manager's perspective, because I've been developing apps for over 13 years and I can't make any excuses for this app anymore. I mean, it's not like Nike is some plucky startup trying to make its way in the world with limited finances. I mean, you know that's just not the case. It's been out for 6 years and they have almost unlimited budget to fix this problem if they wanted to, but clearly they don't see it as a problem or they don't want to. So this begs the question to be asked, is sneakers terrible because Nike's incompetent? Or are they doing this on purpose, maliciously? Before we talk about sneakers, let's go a few years back in time to scenes like this.
You will not believe all the reports of violence that broke out when people rushed to get the newest pair of Air Jordans. A crowd busted through this door in Indiana. And remember, as you're watching these pictures, this is all over shoes. This was the scene in Kansas City where people were sprinting through the halls. Part of the problem is that each store has a limited amount of about 150 pairs.
Everyone rightfully saw this as a problem, even Nike. So in 2017, the company decided to sell directly to consumers with their consumer direct offense, highlighted by the triple-double strategy, double the innovation, double the speed, and double the direct connection to consumers. As a result, they invested heavily into Nike Plus and digital direct-to-consumer. While buffing up their own platforms, Nike teamed up with Amazon to sell their products online. But 2 short years later, Nike ended this relationship with Amazon. Now, one would think that this would have hurt their bottom line, But Nike's strategy was tremendously successful as customers bought from Nike direct, either by downloading its app or going to its website. And by 2020, according to SEMrush, Nike.com has roughly 146 million monthly site visits. To say Nike's strategy has been successful is a massive understatement. In their fiscal 2021 Q2 report, Nike showed revenues of $11.2 billion, up 9% from the previous year, and their digital sales increased by an astonishing 84%. Nike's digital transformation has turned out so well, we need to put this into context. The company announced their consumer direct offense on June 15, 2017. On that day, the company was valued at just a little under $87 billion. 2.5 years later, Nike is now worth $225 billion. They are valued at almost 3.5 times more than Adidas and 7 times more than VF Corp, owners of brands like the North Face, Supreme, and Vans. Nike's now worth $66 billion more than McDonald's and $16 billion more than Coke. Needless to say that their shift to digital has gone extremely well. But how have they done this even though the sneakers app is trash? So there's really no need to talk about the in-stock section because that's the only part of sneakers that functions like a retail app. You go in there, you buy shoes, that's it. And I could talk about the feed, but that's not really why sneakers is terrible. Even though I wish I could curate it and I could see the things that I want to see and not see the things that I don't, like every other feed like Instagram. But really, that's not why sneakers is terrible. Sneakers is terrible starting with the upcoming section. Because I really don't understand how Nike can be so good at convincing people to buy their products and yet so terrible in execution. Because we clearly can't get shoes. And over the past 2 years, I kind of charted roughly how many times I've been successful, and it's about 2%. 2% of the time I've been successful in trying to get shoes that I want. And if I had the success rate in my job, I would be fired because that is terrible. But Nike is allowed to do this.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
So let's talk about the notification system first, because that is by far the best part of all of sneakers, not only from a user's perspective, but also from a product manager. Because as a product manager, we desperately want people to interact with our apps. So we want to send notifications, but for the most part, a lot of these notifications don't add any real benefits to the users. But sneakers is completely different because Nike does a great job at kind of building up hype and building up FOMO so you don't want to miss any drops, so that the notification system lets you know when shoes are dropping a week, a day, 30 minutes in advance. And that is incredibly good. But Nike sweetens the pot even more by having member exclusives like early access, reserved for you, sneakers pass, and also shock drops. So the minute that Nike sends a push notification for your chance to buy a pair of shoes,
money please,
you never want to miss it, and it works incredibly well. Now, from a product manager's perspective, how does this work? How do you get chosen? And look, I don't have insider information on Nike, but how I would probably design it is that I take a look at your LTV, I take a look at where you live, how much you've interacted with the app, such as polls. I mean, a few weeks ago, they launched a LeBron retro poll, and based on the interaction, you might get a chance at a push notification to allow you to buy shoes if you interacted with this. I mean, this push notification system works so well that I never want to be away from my phone because I've missed shock drops before and sneakers pass, and I feel terrible about it. And so I never want to be away from my phone. Anytime that these pop up for us, we desperately want to click on them and then go into the app to spend money. Can you think of another app that sends a single push notification and is able to generate hundreds of thousands, if not millions of purchases of $100 or $500 or more? I mean, that's the power of Nike and this brand. And the push notification system But enough flowers. Let's really talk about why everybody hates sneakers, this horrific buying process. Because it is so bad, I honestly can't think of another app that's this terrible. So let's go through some of the things that make it so terrible.
The tradition of Festivus begins with the airing of grievances.
Automatic screen sizing. I use sneakers on my phone and also on my iPad. And on my iPad, sneakers doesn't automatically resize to fit the window. And I know, again, this is super nitpicky, but the work that it actually takes to do this is pretty inconsequential for the size of Nike's team and money. So by them not adding it really shows you their dedication and not providing a good user experience for its customers. Now, let's talk about things being instantly sold out the minute they're released.
Grand opening, grand closing.
I don't know how many times I've experienced this in the past, but it absolutely is awful. And on behalf of all of my West Coast friends who have to wake up at 7 a.m., log in just to see shoes instantly sold out the second they're released.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. And fuck you, I'm out.
Errors. I don't know how many hamsters running on treadmills sneakers has powering its servers, but on release days, please add more. And I don't know how many times, actually I do know how many times because I calculated it. It's about 80% of the time over the past 3 months that I've encountered an error trying to buy shoes. Now, getting shoes are already difficult, and having an error basically means an automatic L. So please fix these errors. I mean, they're just ruining this app.
Stop it. Get some help.
And then finally, let's just say that the transaction went smooth, you didn't get any errors, and it wasn't instantly sold out. But now here comes the big lie. Pending. Now, most of us know
5 minutes later.
But some of you are thinking, oh no, it can't be that bad. Oh no? Check these out. Over the last 3 months, I've calculated how many times I've actually gotten a pair of shoes, and it's very, very low. Again, it's about 2%. 2% of the time, I'm actually able to get shoes that I want. And by now, it's absolutely just a joke. So what's going on? Why are we all getting L's? And for this, we kind of have to take a look at the bigger picture outside of just the app, specifically the resale market, because Nike absolutely dominates this market because people love the shoes and they want to collect the shoes. And no other brand has this ability. I mean, take a look at Adidas. Outside of Yeezys, who's lining up to get Dames or Hardens? And take a look at Reebok. I mean, they only have one shoe, the Question. And even when they release a PE exclusive of a Kobe colorway, it's only going for about $20 or $30 above retail. So nobody else can generate this kind of hype outside of Nike. And it's not just Jordans. Every single shoe Nike releases gets this kind of hype, from Air Maxes to Dunks to things like Mags. I mean, absolutely crazy resale value on these shoes. And so it's generating a lot of other people outside of sneakerheads just trying to make a profit off of it. And although numbers are hard to find, Cohen Equity Research estimates that in 2019, about $6 billion in revenue was created through the resale market. Now, just to put it into context, in the same year, 2019, Puma's global revenue wasn't even $6 billion. I mean, those are just insane numbers. And it's actually gotten so crazy that a company like Otis is selling shares of a shoe and groups of shoes like a Wall Street tranche. Now also, one important thing about this whole resale market is Nike's return policy. This return policy has created a zero risk environment for resellers to make a fast buck. And who can blame them? Because it's absolutely risk-free. Because if you like the shoes, cool, keep them, whatever, that's a win. But if you don't like the shoes and you can't resell them, you can simply just return it to Nike and they'll pay for shipping. And in the pandemic, it's 60 days now. So you can actually see how well the shoes are selling in the resale market for 60 days before returning to Nike for a full refund. And is it any wonder why this has spawned thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of resellers, and also the rise of bots? Because if you take a look at YouTube for sneakers, one of the first 3 things that will pop up is how to use bots for sneakers. So what's the state of the game right now for us sneakerheads? Because we're fighting amongst each other, trying to get shoes every single release day. We're fighting resellers. They're trying to make a quick buck. And then also we're fighting against bots. So is there something that Nike can do to help the situation, to improve this terrible user experience? Yes, of course, and Nike already has it, draws. Now, for those that don't know how a draw mechanic works, for the first 15 minutes, Nike takes in orders, and then after this time, it tallies the votes, picks random people out of a hat.
Taj Meadows, come on down.
And for everybody else,
That's rough, buddy.
and really, what's the difference between this and its current free-for-all system? It is one thing, the illusion of fairness. Now, as a PM, I understand that this is likely not going to be fair because Nike is probably factoring in things like LTV, app engagement, how many times you voted in the polls, how many times you look at all their other terrible marketing things, and where you live, because they want people to wear the shoes in big cities, of course. But it creates this illusion of fairness that the entire buying process was fair and that everybody had a semi-equal chance, because that's really all we want. Right now, I think we can all agree.
It's not right. It's not fair.
And now that you know that Nike has a perfectly good system to have a better user experience, I ask this question again. Is sneakers terrible because they're incompetent, or are they doing this on purpose? So let me know what you think. And in the spirit of being a PM, I want data. So give a like if you think it's Nike's incompetence that sneakers is terrible, or a dislike if you think that they're doing this on purpose. I'm out.
Oh, one more thing.
I've got one little piece of evidence that I think will really sway your opinion. So open up the sneakers app, go to your profile, and then go to settings. Scroll down to country and region, and then scroll all the way down to the second to the last country, which is China. Click on Chinese, and don't worry, everything will still largely be in English. And then let's take a look at the upcoming section, because here you'll see some really crazy stuff. The very first shoe right here is the Chinese New Year Air Jordan Low. Now, click on it, and then you'll take a look at, it's a draw. Interesting. But you might be wondering, hey, this is a limited edition thing. They only have a few thousand pair and it's geo-exclusive. But okay, let's take a look at some of the other shoes that are the exact same in US and also in China. And over the past few months, I've taken a look at both markets, examining the shoes that are the exact same and likely good in resale, such as the Dunks, the Jordans, Air Maxes, and any special collaborations. And you know what the difference is? In China, they were released as draws, and in the US, it was a free-for-all. The absolute worst user experience possible. So do you know what this means? It means that sneakers could provide a better user experience anytime it wanted to by releasing shoes as a draw. But in the US, it's chosen not to.
I choose violence.
But why treat China better? Well, I'm glad you asked. As I mentioned, in Nike's fiscal 2021 Q2 reports, the company posted quarterly revenues of $11.2 billion, and Nike brand digital sales, like sneakers, increased 84%. Do you know which region reported the strongest revenue growth? You guessed it, China.
Check out the big brain on Brad. You're a smart motherfucker, that's right.
And while China's revenue as a percentage of total revenue for Nike is still not close to North America, its rate of increase over the past 10 years has been staggering. And if estimates are correct, in less than 10 years, there'll be more people in China with an annual disposable income of $11,000 than the entire population of the US. So Nike definitely knows which way the wind is blowing. Now, this is nothing new. We do it all the time. It's just called cohorting. Basically, you put people in separate buckets and give them slightly different user experiences, maybe different price points, but the end goal is to increase sales and to make more sales. But clearly, sneakers doesn't do this. What it's choosing is that it's giving somebody a worser experience than somebody else. And they're doing this consciously. But this doesn't answer the fundamental question of why treat the Chinese customers better than the US if the US is actually generating more revenue. And it's really all about the FATUI, the first time user experience. Because when you're trying to lure people into your brand, into this app, the very first few times we carefully construct this entire world so that you have a very good experience. You're beating bosses, no worries. You're getting tons of loot. Everything is going your way because you don't have brand loyalty yet. We're trying to develop that. And we don't want to slap you upside the head with a terrible user experience because you'll just leave. And China just doesn't have the brand loyalty and nostalgia behind it the same way that US did. I mean, because in the US, we grew up with Jordan. We grew up on the Wands and then the Concords. And anytime that it gets released, nostalgia takes over and overrides common sense and terrible user experiences because you want to recapture those types of things in your childhood. I mean, Nike barely opened up its first flagship store in China in 2007. So they didn't grow up on this kind of stuff. And that's really important. And that's actually why Star Wars bombs in China. Because while we grew up with Luke on Tatooine, they grew up with this.
I don't like sand. It's coarse, and rough, and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
And when we're trying to tell them, hey, Luke is amazing, and aren't Jedis fantastic? They're like, what? This guy? So if Nike tries to do its same buffoonery on sneakers the same way in China that it does in the US, you know what the Chinese market will just do?
Bye, Felicia.
No, absolutely not. Jordans are still fire and everybody wants them. They'll just buy counterfeits. Because when you make it so difficult to actually buy a product, people will find an alternate way. And according to the European Union's Intellectual Property Office, 80% of the counterfeit products that they seize originate from China and Hong Kong. So it's incredibly easy to get counterfeit products over there. And also, and you can fight me on this, but the diminishing quality control of Nikes, along with their cheaper uses of leather, I think that some of these counterfeits are actually a better quality than the real deal Nikes.
No way.
And when you combine that with this terrible buying experience, it's no wonder that people are just going to buy these counterfeit shoes because it's much easier and the quality's a little bit better. So what do we know? We know that we're out here constantly taking L's every single release day, even though Nike has a much better way of giving us all a better user experience. They've basically created this. And as a game developer, this is what we call the core game loop. So starting with the first one, you get tensions building as you constantly take in L's, and then something tragic happens where you're almost at your breaking point with the app. Maybe getting a system error when you're trying to get some Chicagos or other grails, and you finally had it. You're done. But then you finally get a dub, and joy of joys, you're happy, and you've posted the famous got 'em on social media, and then all is forgotten. But of course, this cycle repeats. Sounds about right, no? Pretty accurate? But let me tell you, I didn't create this loop. I just adapted it from Lenore Walker's Cycle of Abuse, the patterns of behavior in an abusive relationship. Because sadly, that's what I feel my relationship with Nike has become. So I ask this again, is this terrible user experience on sneakers Nike's incompetence? Or are they doing this on purpose, maliciously? Now, will I stop using sneakers? Probably not. Because even though it treats me like shit, I still love it. And isn't that what the hallmark of being in an abusive relationship is all about? But at least I know what Nike's trying to do to me now, so I won't be taking any of these L's personally. And I'll continue to use the app for resale because I'm a PM. I'm not going to turn down a risk-free environment to make money. But for shoes I really want to keep, I likely won't go to sneakers because I'm absolutely done with it. Because it's such a hassle and there's much easier ways to get the shoes that I want. And they might be better quality. I don't know. But let me know what you think. Hit the like button if you think sneakers is terrible because Nike's incompetent, or the dislike button if you think that they're doing this on purpose. Let me know, guys.